Hello and welcome. This is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. And in this video today, we're going to cover the Ethical Hacking Lab series for web pen testing. So this lab is all about using Nikto for web application vulnerability scanning. And also we'll be looking at Burp Suite and using this as an interception proxy. And we'll do some brute force attacks on a login. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I know other labs that we've worked on also worked with Nikto, but we'll go ahead and run through this again. Very good practice to keep working with these tools. So I'm logged into the Kali machine. The topology on this lab is fairly straightforward. We have our Kali attacker machine, and we'll also be accessing the OWASP BWA website, and this is what we're going to be scanning as well using Nikto and also working with Burp Suite. So for Nikto, remember this is a command line only tool, and we can get help by typing Nikto-H. So you see all of our different options here, and let's just go ahead and do a standard scan with no particular options. So we type in Nikto-host to specify the host, and remember the OWASP BWA machine is at 192.168.68.12. So the .12 is the host IP. Okay, go ahead and add that in. And you could see we get a pretty quick response, and it's running through pretty much all of the various tests and utilizing all of the different plugins that Nikto has available, right? So before we go into detail about all of this, a large part of this lab is also pointing out how we can kind of drill down into more specific scans. We could actually take a look at what plugins are available and then do very specific scans. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. Control L, by the way, is a nice shortcut to clear the screen. So let's type in Nikto-list-plugins. So what this returns is all of the different plugins that are available and a description of what they do, right? So it's general good practice when you're doing scans, especially scans that they're more active, they're actually connecting to a host. You only want to scan for what you need, if you know what you need, right? So in this case, if we want to just look for particular outdated versions, we can use the outdated plugin. Okay, and then some of these other ones, I know we're going to be working with tests. We're gonna do a scan on messages. So we're gonna check the server version against known issues, try and find specific vulnerabilities. Okay, so let's go ahead and do. Let me clear the screen. Let's do a very specific scan. So we're going to say, I want to choose a very specific plugin, and that's called outdated. And then I specify the host again, 192.168.68.12. And now you can see our scan return back much quicker, and we are only getting outdated versions. Okay. Now moving on to the next part, there is a plugin for HTTP options. And essentially, this is just going to return back what kind of HTTP methods does this web server allow? And we see that here. Now, a lot of these are, I was going to say harmless, but essentially necessary, because I mean, get, head, and post, these are necessary methods for a web server to allow and to enable, right? To interact with a website, you need to be able to send it, get and post requests. Now, options here, this is kind of interesting because this is technically, because this was enabled, this is why we were able to do this scan in the first place. We were able to check the options on the server. So this could potentially be disabled to attempt to stop attackers from, gathering this information. And notice here we have the notes, HTTP trace method is active, suggesting the host is vulnerable to XST. So XST is cross-site tracing. And this is essentially how you could use the trace method to retrieve HTTP only cookies or potentially authorization headers. So this is something that should definitely be disabled. Okay, and then moving on, we have the messages plugin. Okay, and remember the messages plugin, that's checking for the current server version and any known issues. So we notice that we do have an issue here, potentially vulnerable to a remote buffer overflow. And that could actually give a remote shell. So that's definitely a pretty big vulnerability there. And now we can also run just more general tests by using the tests plugin. And this is very similar to the original default scan that we ran, but I think it will run a little bit quicker. And you notice here that it's finding these directories, and this is kind of very common in web app pen testing, looking for vulnerabilities, and you're doing like a directory traversal. You're finding maybe hidden directories, and even here we see what is potentially an administrator login. So yeah, right here, PHP my admin directory found. And just to show what this means, so remember, we're scanning, let's look at the topology. We're scanning the website that is on this web server. And if we just visit that from the Kali machine in Firefox, this is the website that we're scanning right now. And if we're finding potentially hidden directories, so okay, we know that there is this directory test. Well, let's check it out. What is there? Okay, and now we have this directory test output. These are things that are potentially should not be publicly available. They might assume, well, we don't have a link to them, so nobody knows that that's there, but that's not the case, because you can see how we're able to scan for these directories. And let's take a look at this PHP my admin. And now we have the administrator login page. So, this is something we could potentially do a brute force attack on and attempt to get the login credentials. All right. And then finally, we can send all this to a report. If you're not a fan of going through the command line reporting, we can specify an output to a report.html. Okay, so it's rerunning the full scan, and then it's going to send all of that to an HTML file. Okay, so that scan is done. It's reported to that HTML file. So we can come up here, go to File Manager, making sure that we're in the root directory. We see that report.html. One thing I'll note, the lab states that it may not work with the Chromium web browser, but we could right click on that, choose Open With, and open with Firefox ESR. So you can see a much nicer report as compared to the command line. So if this is something you prefer, obviously you can maybe even also print this out if you need a physical copy to look over. So that's that. So that concludes the section on Nikto. And like I said, this should be review because we did cover Nikto in another lab as well, but always good to kind of go back over that. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Go back to the main OWASP BWA site. Let's go ahead and clear the screen. We'll get started in the next section. All right, so we're moving on to Burp Suite. So Burp Suite is definitely one of the more popular interception proxies used for web application pen testing, and very largely used by the bug bounty community, which bug bounty work is when you are attempting to find vulnerabilities in websites, and you could potentially earn money for that as well. But it's very important that as you do that, you understand what is in scope. And this is something we're going to touch on as we set up Burp Suite, because it's important that as you do these kind of scans, that you're only scanning what you're allowed and what you're, you've been given permission to do, right? Because you never want to do these against just random websites. So as you learn these tools, you have to be careful about when and where you use them. The first thing we want to do is we can launch Burp Suite straight from the command line. Just type in Burp Suite, no space, and you'll see that it'll start launching here. Okay, there we go. Your JRE appears to be version outdated, not been fully tested. Just press OK here. We have a few random command prompts to get through. Okay, terms and conditions, I accept. We can just go ahead and launch a temporary project. That's fine. Press next. Use burp defaults, also okay. And then we'll start burp. And Burp Suite is out of date. Also okay, no worries. Unfortunately, we can't update it here on the NETLAB because we're sandboxed, no internet connection. But that is fine. So we've got a whole bunch of information here. We're only going to be focusing on a couple different aspects, so try not to get too overwhelmed by everything. We actually really won't even be diving into the dashboard here. We're mainly going to be looking at the target tab, and later we're going to be sending some things to the intruder to do brute force attacks. Okay. But first things first, we need to set up Burp Suite to be our interception proxy in terms of our web browser. So in terms of Firefox. So within Firefox, and remember this is the Firefox that you have open in the lab, not your own personal one. Although the setup would be the same if you chose to use Burp Suite at home. So in Firefox, you will choose open menu in the top right corner, those three dashes, and you will want to come to preferences. And if you scroll all the way to the very bottom, we see network settings, and we'll choose settings, and we'll select manual proxy configuration. And we're going to add 127.0.0.1, and you may recognize this by now. This is our loopback interface. We're basically interacting with ourselves here, and we're going to use port 8080. And we want to set this, use this proxy server for all protocols. Okay, so that is it. That's set up. So I can close out of the preferences. Now, if we go back to Burp Suite and we go to the proxy tab here, we're going to see that we have a request to detect portal firefox.com. So this is where we can keep intercepting communication that comes through the web browser, like whenever you request a website, whenever you submit maybe like a form, or in a lot of cases you're submitting a password, you want to intercept that request. But in this case, we're going to turn intercept off. So you see right now, intercept is on. We're going to click that to intercept is off. Okay. And now next up, if we come back to our web browser and just revisit the OWASP BWA page. So I'm going to click refresh. That will work. And now when you come back to Burp Suite and you go to the target tab that we talked about earlier, you notice that the IP address of the web server is in the left menu here. And we notice various GET requests here. We see images. Basically, this is from the website loading. And we start to build what's called a sitemap. Okay. But we talked about earlier about scope and knowing what's in scope, what's out of scope. When it comes to doing these kinds of web application pen testing, you will always know what you'll basically be told what is in scope. And so for the purpose of this lab, let's say that this entire website is in scope. We have been given permission to do tests on this. So let's go ahead and right click and let's choose add to scope. And now this is important. It says you have added an item to target scope. Do you want Burp Proxy to stop sending out of scope items to the history or other Burp tools? And say yes. So we will not accumulate project data for out of scope items. Okay, so that means that we will only be collecting on this web server. And then one final addition to that, if we go to proxy, click options, under intercept client requests, we also want to check this box here, and URL is in target scope. Okay, so that takes care of essentially just the setup, right? That's setting up Burp Suite to be used as the proxy, and it's also making sure that we're doing it safely. And we've set our target that is in scope so that we know that we're not collecting a bunch of other random information if we happen to visit a different website or on a totally different server. Okay, and that brings us to part 3. So building a sitemap with Burp Suite. You notice that since we visited the site, you can expand this here. And you notice that we've already started collecting information. You could also right click that and choose expand branch. And let's see what happens if we visit more of the site. So if we scroll down a bit and we visit this page here, then when we come back, we notice, okay, we get this folder now because we visited the DVWA. We now see a login PHP here. So all of this sitemap keeps getting updated as you visit other areas of the website. And so now that we've visited this login page, the lab just wants us to go ahead and log into it. So we'll type in admin and then admin for the password. Okay, so we have logged in. But now let's see what kind of information that shows us over at Burp Suite. So we have the original GET request, which was just us displaying that page. Now, finally, we have the post. So that remember, the post is when we're actually sending something to the server. GET is just getting from the server. But here we have the post, and you can see that the params column here is checked, meaning that parameters were passed. So we can see that information here. So username equals admin and password equals admin. And if we click on the parameters tab here, we also see the various parameters that were set. We also see session ID. We see parts of, actually all of the cookie as well. Okay, so moving on to part 4, brute forcing a web application. So we're going to go to proxy. Let's go to the HTTP history. And we can right click anywhere here. And we're just going to go ahead and clear history. And let's head back to our web browser. And let's click over to where it says brute force. Remember, this DVWA is essentially a web app that's designed for us to practice these things. So they have a brute force section here set up for us to practice this, right? So let's type in admin, and then for the password, the lab is recommending we just type in pass. And we get a response back, username and or password is incorrect. Okay, so challenge accepted, right? So let's see if we can brute force and figure out what this password is. So we will head back over to Burp Suite, and we can see we're already looking at the HTTP history, and we had just recently cleared it. So we see here this request that we just made. Okay. We see the parameters checkbox here. We click on parameters. We can see those here. But what we could do is right click on this request and send to intruder. So we do have other types of options here, like repeater, sequencer, decoder, compare. There's a lot of things you could do in Burp Suite, but in this lab, we're just going to be working with intruder, which is definitely most useful for these kind of brute force attacks. So the target tab here auto-populates. It knows what the web server is. Of course, it's working through port 80. Now, if we click on positions, the first thing that we want to choose is the attack type. And now you see we have 4 different attack types here. These basically each specify how the payloads are used and set. And you notice right now it's setting multiple payloads. So pretty much everything that's in between this special character is currently set as a different payload. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's like 7 different payloads set here. And this is going a little bit more detail than what the lab talks about, but I figured I would mention these different attack types and what they do. So Sniper essentially uses only one payload set and replaces one position at a time. Whereas Battering Ram, this places the same payload in all positions. So you choose one payload and then it's going to try it in every one of these. Now Pitchfork, this uses one payload for each payload type. So payload 1 is going to go into this position. Payload 2 is specified for this position. Payload 3 would be specified this position. It's very specific. Now we're going to select Cluster Bomb for the lab, and this is definitely very useful for brute force attacks. It's similar to the Pitchfork style, where it will have it will use the first payload for the first designation here or position, and then the second payload for the second position. But it will, as it loops, if something wasn't found, it will try the different combinations. So it will definitely capture the most area for the various payloads that you set. So anyways, like I said, that was a little bit deeper detail, but I thought it would be useful to know how these different attack types work in Burp Suite. So now that we've selected cluster bomb, let's go ahead and clear the payloads that it auto set, the payload positions. And we want to basically do brute force attacks on the username and the paths. So I'm going to double click admin and then click add. And you notice it adds those special characters in between. And then the same for the paths. We're going to double click that, choose add. So we basically just set 2 different payload positions. Now we have to move over to the payloads tab. And this is where we set our payload sets. So we have 2 positions, which means we have 2 different payload sets to consider. The first payload set for this lab, we're going to keep it really simple. And this is where we could, and remember that the first payload position is related to the username. So let's just assume that we know for sure that the username is admin. Now we could potentially put other things here. We could put root, we could put administrator, we could add as many different options here. But for the sake of the lab, I know it just wants to keep it simple. We'll keep it to just admin. We know that's going to be a match. Now moving over to payload set 2, this is where we're going to do something a little bit different. We want to pull from a word list. So our payload type, we're going to change this to runtime file. And you notice this now gives us a new option. And we could select file. We'll go back to the // folder at the very root level. We're going to select user, share, word lists, which is down here. And we'll go into the Metasploit folder and select Unix passwords. Okay, so this is basically just a text file filled with words that are potential passwords. And so that is about it. Now we are ready to, oh no, I'm sorry, there is another part. This will help in the reporting when we get our results from the scan. We want to know very clearly which ones are incorrect. And you notice that back at the web portal, we got the message username and or password incorrect. So we're going to actually grep or search for the word incorrect in the responses. So if we click on options and scroll down to the grep match section, let's go ahead and clear the current list. And instead, let's just add incorrect. And you'll see here in just a second when we run this scan how this helps in determining what the correct match is. So now if we scroll all the way to the top, in any of these tabs, we see the start attack. So it doesn't matter where you're at, but we'll go ahead and click start attack. So we've set our attack type, we set our payload positions, we set our 2 different payload sets, and we are grepping for, where did it go? Here we go. We're grepping for the word incorrect. So let's go ahead and start the attack. Demo version, yeah, that's fine. Press OK. And off it goes. So you can see it going through the word list. Payload 1, we set that to only attempt the username of admin. But for password, it is trying everything in that text file. right? And it's still going. But you could see here on the right side, we have a tab, which is based on that grep match list that we created. And what do we see here? Most of these are all checked as incorrect, except for this one here. So not a very clever password. It is in fact just admin, but we can tell that we did not get that incorrect response, so that must be it. And in fact, we could come back to the website and let's go ahead and try admin. Welcome to the password protected area, admin. All right, and that concludes the lab. You can see it's still going down here too, 53 of 1002. So there's 1002 entries in that text file. But we can go ahead and just close out of that. This will exit the current attack. That's okay. All right. So that concludes this lab, ethical hacking lab series, lab 10, web pen testing. And this was covering Nikto for command line web app vulnerability scanning and Burp Suite interception proxy. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next one.